Alrighty. I'm sorry, my first attempt to record this was interrupted by Kat, so you're getting Kat in the video frame. Anyway, we have a car in space. I know, I'm very late to the party. Everyone's been talking about this for the past 3 days. I mean, I've been talking about this for the past 3 days, but we have a car in space. I think that this is going to wind up being the most important event of the century. Or this is going to be the defining event of the century. This isn't going to be the most important event of the century. Really, this is nothing more than a publicity stunt right now. But what this means, what this opens up, is going to allow the most important events of the century 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I think, as a theology student myself, that this opens lots and lots of fascinating questions for the church. The most, not the most pressing of which, but I think the most ultimately important of which is, do we need parishes on the moon? Do we need parishes on Mars? Do we need parishes on Europa? And personally, I very strongly believe that the answer is yes. So I'm sending this out to all of my various friends in Churchland. Hi, friends in Churchland. I want to start talking about what presence the church needs to have in the emerging world of space development. And my personal belief is that the church needs to lead this. I would like, within the next 50 years, to see actual established parishes in the Anglican Communion on the atmosphere of Venus, on the Earth, obviously, that one's kind of a given, but also the Moon, Mars, Sirius and the asteroid belt, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto, moons of Jupiter, Titan and Enceladus, moons of Saturn, so that would be 10. That would be 10 bodies that I'd like to see the church have a presence on within 50 years. And I think, for the first time, I think we can do that. I think that's plausible. Well, I think that's possible. 50 years is very ambitious, but 50 years for some of those I don't think is ambitious at all. I think 20 years for the moon is entirely reasonable for the moon. And for the moon, I think that we have an opportunity to, I've talked about it before, as civilizing space. Having opera on the moon, having people speaking a dozen different languages on Mars. So far, when people talk about leaving the Earth, they tend to talk about it in two very limited contexts. First of all, they'll talk about it in terms of scientific exploration, and while I agree that's extraordinarily important, I don't see it as a great impetus to sending people into space, because we've reached the point where most of that kind of exploratory work can be done by robots. And secondly, there's a very, very pessimistic belief that the world is going to hell in a handbasket and we need a backup on the moon or Mars or somewhere, but when the Earth blows itself up, we need people somewhere else. And I just don't see that. The world is awesome and it's getting better every day. We aren't going to fall apart in the next 15 years. So neither of those are compelling to me, but I think there is a third reason, and that is that the spreading of life, the spreading of humanity, the spreading of our culture and our civilization, our religion, our art, our traditions is valuable in and of itself. I want to see mosques on the moon. I want to see swing dancing on Jupiter. Not Jupiter. I want to see swing dancing on Europa. Jupiter would be bad. And I think all of these are now possible. Those doors have opened. I think there's a real possibility for a community on the moon, which I think is the most immediate possibility, of a community of a dozen Anglicans, accompanied by a community of a dozen Roman Catholics, a community of a dozen Sunni Muslims, a community of a dozen Mahayana Buddhists, a community of a dozen Orthodox Jews, all living together and doing essentially ecumenical work. And doing so in a place where everyone on Earth can look up through their telescopes and see where that's happening, and can identify that from their backyards. And doing so for all of humanity. And I think that is something which could be extraordinarily inspiring. And I think that is a reason to do this kind of exploration that doesn't require options that could be replaced by robots or are extremely nihilistic in nature. And I think those doors have been opened. So yeah, comments, and enjoy.